The next company in the lineup is Amazentis, and I believe we have, there you are, Anurag, lovely, welcome.
So thanks to the organizers. I believe I've presented already the last 2 years, but of course, in a small startup environment, you progress very fast, and so happy to share all the progress today. So you've heard a lot about the different hallmarks of aging and the different targets that different companies and approaches to target it. I'd like to have a little sort of a different story from the nutrition side. So Amazentis, just to sort of I'll be giving more of the medical and clinical development updates of the company. Let's see my screen, why it's not moving to the next slide. Okay, there you go. Yeah, so a quick background on the company. So Amazentis is a Swiss life science biotech formed out of the Swiss Institute of Technology here in Lausanne, which is where we are based. It was founded close to 15 years back. And the idea 15 years back was really to sort of create the Genentech of the nutrition space. So of course, the pharma and biotech approach to developing drugs is very well known and established. In the nutrition space and looking and researching at new novel natural compounds was something that you didn't hear a lot. And so that's really where the company's sort of ideology started. And 15 years of research have led to sort of a real clear focus and a clear path on a microbiome-derived metabolite, which is a postbiotic called Urolithin A, which I'll be talking about today, and how it impacts longevity and mitochondrial health. So from a mission, sort of a company vision and mission approach, and again, from keeping in mind that the products we are developing today are all nutrition and sort of playing in the consumer health space, our focus is really on the health span and really focusing on things that dictate health span, like mobility. And so that's where most of our research over the last 10 plus years has really focused on. In this meeting, you've heard a lot about the hallmarks of aging. We don't pretend to hit all of the different hallmarks of aging, but we are very passionate in the company about one in particular, and that's mitochondrial function, which we do believe connects a lot of dots to these key hallmarks of aging. And over time, I mean, the mitochondria, of course, everybody's knows about them, and we know they're these super sort of powerhouses and the energy generators of our cells, and of course the energy we have to move around or to think clearly. But the field itself, in general, over the last 20 years, has seen a massive interest, and as you can see on the right, the influx of new publications and really top high-level publication. The field has just started and is really increasing every year. Today, as a company, we started out mostly in mobility and muscle. Since then, we have current interest now in immune biology and how mitochondria regulate immune health. And we're starting to develop a very sort of keen interest in skin biology, because aging, of course, people like to move more and they want to have the immune function and their hearts to be and to think clearly, but skin is sort of really connected to visual aging. And so I'll be talking a little about how we have connected the dots. So focusing on close to, I guess, last 10 plus of research, which has started out with a focus on muscle aging. And we chose to go after muscle aging mostly from a sort of a consumer health perspective, because if you look at the graph on the right, what happens with muscle aging is that you peak in your 20s and 30s. And then if you're eating right and if you're, very physically active, you can pretty much follow the green curve, the trajectory, and have a very good health span in your 70s and 80s, do your daily activities of living. Now, if you're sedentary and you're not eating the right foods and diets, you can pretty much follow into the black curve, which can take you into sort of the disease spectrum, which is in red. And this is conditions which clinicians like myself call as frailty and sarcopenia. And so, yes, there can be drugs that you develop to address frailty and sarcopenia, but the damage has started much earlier. And so that has always been sort of the vision of our company is to address this muscle aging much earlier by hitting on mitochondrial and cellular health already when you're in your 30s and 40s. So now back to mitochondria. When we started out, that was a very buzzy word, and people were looking in all kinds of animal models where you have access to a lot of tissue and cells. But when you actually try to translate it, which is kind of what we have done here for the last 7-8 years, looking at mitochondria in humans is not easy. You need to go in and take either muscle biopsies if you're looking in the skeletal muscle, or you need to do spinal tap to get access to CSF to really study biomarkers, or you need to look at immune cells. And so when we started out, we did a very simple study that is shown here and got published about a number of years back. We took 70-year-olds who were running training for half and full marathons, and we compared them to age-matched 70-year-olds who were kind of almost on the trajectory that I showed you towards frailty. And the two things that stood out really was the decline in muscle strength these pre-frail had compared to their counterparts who were very active and almost training for half marathons. And the second was their physical activity levels. So we went in and we took muscle biopsies and we asked the question, what's happening in their skeletal muscle? And the answer was really mitochondria. And the mitochondria, so what you see in the right and in different mitochondria exist as different complexes, complex 1, 2 to 5. And in orange, or what you see is basically the pre-frail older adults compared to the very active in blue. In whatever complex abundance we looked at in the skeletal muscle in these older adults, it was really the pre-frail had much lower abundance. And so we said, well, muscle biopsy is a very invasive measure. Let's try to find other tools that clinicians can sort of access in clinical research. So we went in, we started putting these older adults in an MRI-like setup where you can look at ATP depletion, and the marker we use is phosphocreatinine, which is basically a key marker for ATP generation. And we saw the same thing. We saw that as they exercise, the older adults who were more active in blue, and then you're seeing how quickly the ATP is coming back. It came back much faster. So their recovery time of, let's say, their phosphocreatinine or ATP or energy was much faster compared to the pre-frail who took much longer to sort of recover. And that set off an aha moment. And we said, okay, let's go after the mitochondria. So we started a whole screening program with natural compounds. And the one that stood out is the molecule that I'll be talking about. It's called Urolithin A. And the origins of the molecule are in our food and diet. So a lot of dietary precursors, and these are called polyphenols, such as elagitannins. These are present in pomegranates. These are present in all the berries, the healthy berries, and pecans and walnuts. When you take them and you ingest them, now, if you're eating the right diet, then you need to have a second important thing in the chain, which is your gut microbiome. If you have a right gut microbiome, you will naturally produce this molecule. But in our clinical studies, we are seeing that about 60 to 70% of the people at the healthy adults don't make this molecule, which means either A, they're not eating right, or B, they don't have the right gut microbiome. I think I eat right, but my body, I can drink 6 glasses of pomegranate juice. My body will never make the metabolite or the microbiome derived metabolite, just because it's never had the sort of the right gut microbiome. So this sort of led to the idea of direct supplementation. And our studies today are showing that when you supplement this molecule, it leads to healthier mitochondria. And it does that. And so most of our work in the start was done with research labs here in the Swiss Institute of Technology, with the lab of Professor Johann Albrechts, who's a famous mitochondrial scientist. And Johann has been behind the discoveries of resveratrol and the NAD modulators and several other drugs even. And we gave him this compound essentially without telling him what it was. And he started playing with the precursors, which you see the elagitannins, in these sort of aging models of worms, the C. elegans. When he would give them in the diet of worms, the elagitannins, he was not seeing any impact on health span or lifespan. But when he gave Urolithin A in the diet of these worms, they started living about 45 to 50% longer. And he came running to our company and he said, well, what have you given me? This is the best molecule I've ever worked with. And so that led to sort of, where we are today, 10 years down the road. And so from there, we went and gave it to older animals. 6 weeks of supplementation led to dramatic improvements in grip strength and aerobic endurance by about 60%. And this was, of course, published several years back in Nature Medicine. Now, how does that happen has been a fascinating area of research for us. We have targeted the effects of how Urolithin A works on mitochondria to a very well-conserved aging pathway called mitophagy. And essentially what is mitophagy is, if you look at the life cycle of a mitochondria here, you go from being very healthy with healthy mitochondria in your cells to accumulating oxidative stress and reactive oxygen species pretty much as you age or you get stressed. And what happens even down the road with aged people, when you're in older adults, about 60, 70 and down the road, is that your cells accumulate these faulty or damaged goods, sort of the damaged mitochondria, and they cannot clean them out very well. So you think of it like your recycling bin in your home, where you've accumulated a lot of trash, but if you're not cleaning it out, then of course your home will not smell well. And that's exactly what's happening in our cells. So what Urolithin A does is basically reactivates and revs up this cleaning waste disposal machinery and packages these faulty mitochondria into sort of a targeted autophagy in the mitochondria called mitophagy. And that leads to sort of, again, the building blocks that contributes to healthier newer mitochondria, which is a process called dysbiogenesis. How does it differ from other, let's say, other known molecules out there that impact mitochondrial health? Now, there are several modulators of mitochondrial biogenesis. I only show nutritional ones here, but of course there are drugs like rapamycin and metformin that also hit biogenesis and energy production. And of course, there's things like resveratrol and NAD supplementation and CoQ10 and creatinine. But where I think this discovery sits is that unless you clean the system with mitophagy, you're not going to get optimal energy production. You're not going to get biogenesis that is very optimal. And so that's sort of where the sweet spot of Urolithin A discovery is. Since our first papers, a lot of interest around this molecule. Scripps has just published a paper. They've started looking at osteoarthritis patients and in different models of osteoarthritis, where also they see that there's increased decline in mitophagy in the joints. And then by giving Urolithin A, they see increased mitophagy in the joint tissue and less inflammation. This is work that was published. The National Institute of Aging published a couple of years back in a Nature Neuroscience paper, where they basically took out of 1,000 molecules and they were screening them in models of Alzheimer's disease. Actually, the top one that came up in their profiling was Urolithin A, where it showed effects in reducing amyloid beta plaques, on neuroinflammation, and even improved a lot of the pathophysiology. And even at the Buck, they have got a $3 million grant to now study this molecule for Alzheimer's disease. So what have we done in the company? What we have done basically a proprietary formulation of a synthesized molecule of Urolithin A. And what we see, actually, we've run a number of trials. So this is a trial done in the US. This is 100 people. When we call them into the diet, I told you before that some of us can make this molecule. What we see in a metropolitan area, and this is Chicago, by the way, in the US, out of 100, we only saw 12% of the people make this molecule. So that means, well, they were doing it right. They're eating their berries and nuts. Now, if we take the same 100 people and we actually provide them the right diet, so we provided them a pure glass of pomegranate juice, only about 40% of the people converted. And then we actually called them back and gave them the sort of calibrated supplementation with 500 milligrams of Urolithin A to bypass the natural conversion. You get about a 6-7-fold higher boost. And that's the levels that we call them the therapeutic range to sort of get the desired health benefits. And we have looked at the microbiome of these people who can make and who cannot make. And the answer is long and probably will need a bit much longer discussion, but it boils down to your gut microbiome and how rich and diverse it is. So it's a fascinating molecule. We have done a number of clinical trials. Until last year, I was always coming with one because that was the only one that we had published in Nature Metabolism a few years back. I had shown you data basically from older adults who run marathons, and when we did skeletal biopsies, so each column is a subject, each row is a mitochondrial gene. Blue means the mitochondria are not in good shape, red means they are happy, or a lot of them are expressed in the muscle. So people who exercise a lot, who are training for marathons and half marathons, when you biopsy them and look at their muscle, it looks a lot of red, which means a lot of mitochondria. The sort of sedentary couch potatoes, we don't see it, a lot of blue. In the older adults now, when we take the similar sedentary aged older adults and we do our RCT for 4 weeks and we do muscle biopsies again, we don't see much happening in the placebo group, and we see a dose-dependent increase in upregulation of mitochondrial genes in the skeletal muscle. And so that led us to do and launched further studies, two of which have just got published earlier this year. One is a trial done in older adults. This is all in a partnership with the University of Washington, where we took older adults and they're all healthy, but they don't move around too much. And they took it for 2 to 4 months. And then we make them do certain exercises in the hand and leg. And here's just showing you the leg exercise results. When they come back after 2 to 4 months, we don't see much of a change in the placebo. But in the MitoPure or the Urolithin A group, there's a close to about a 20% improvement in resistance to fatigue, which means basically they have more endurance, so they're able to do the exercise much longer. We have gone in and asked the question, will it only work for older adults who have some sort of decline in mobility happening, or can we go a bit on the left side of the aging curve and start early? So we've gone in after the 40 to 50-year-olds in this trial. This is another trial that we just published in Cell Medicine around the middle half of this year. And in this similar story, we again looked at the leg strength here, and these are overweight adults. So they, again, being sedentary, they also sort of have a higher BMI. And again, we see similar improvements in sort of improvement, statistical improvement of strength. And where we are today now is basically we've started exploring things beyond, because every time you run sort of, and a lot of companies will face this in their translation pathway, you can't just biopsy in every study, and most people get turned off with biopsy. So we started looking at more the sort of what are these other systemic signatures of mitochondrial health that we can pick up. And so we've started looking at immune cells, and we think it's a very good window to look at somebody's mitochondrial health. So here, from the study I showed you in the muscle, where we have published that we can improve with Urolithin A lot of mitochondrial gene expression, we have taken the immune cells, and we see the same. We see the same signature in mitochondria in the immune cells, and that has led us to sort of a much bigger program in clinical that we have launched. So in addition to muscle, where we have a number of studies, so we are stretching the boundaries even more. We are going after elite athletes. So we have a study wrapping up soon in Australia, where you would think that elite athletes have optimal mitochondrial function, but they suffer from what is called as overtraining syndrome that also impacts their sort of mitochondrial health. And so we are looking at their recovery and performance. And then we are going after hospitalized people who, believe it or not, also need nutrition to sort of get out of the hospital faster, and the longer they stay, the more muscle wasting they will have. And we have 2 immune studies, one, again, looking at more the mitochondrial function of immune cells, and the second one, we have just got awarded $1 million grant from the Swiss government here, looking at post-cancer patients who also basically have a zero immune system and have suffered from fatigue. So we are doing that. And then on the skin front, we are actually looking at topical applications of MitoPure into sort of the next generation of our products that our company will launch. I mentioned this already. We have several top universities and labs that are working on it, that we have active collaboration. So we are about to launch trials with partnership with the University of Lausanne. We are working in grants with Harvard, Northwestern, name it, all the top universities. And today, just to summarize the product range, good discovery should not only come in pills. I personally believe that should come in good taste as well, that not just diseased people should be taking, but everyone should be taking. And so we have a whole pipeline of products. We have the origins of the discovery, the pomegranate berry flavored food product that you can mix in your everyday breakfast. So I've seen the transition of this molecule from the bench to your breakfast table, and I'm very sort of happy about that. We also have a flavor on ginger that a lot of people are loving. A lot of people prefer to take high protein shakes to help their mobility and maintain their muscles. So we have a combination product with 20 grams of whey protein and the MitoPure or Urolithin A. We have the pills that are, of course, a popular product. But again, we are also thinking in terms of what else would consumers like to know? And that's where the precision nutrition approach comes in, where we have a kit that is under development, where you can actually prick yourself in the finger with a few drops of blood, send to a lab, sort of a dry blood spot card, and we'll tell you if you're naturally making this molecule and the levels that you'll see changing with supplementation. So with that, I think that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anurag. This is pretty amazing stuff. There are a couple of questions from the chat I just want to introduce.
Yeah, sure, please.
How long does it take urolithin A to cause mitophagy, generally speaking?
Yeah, it's something I've presented in the past, but and that's why I took out the slides. But it's good to sort of revisit the data. So the half-life of the molecule is about 17 to 22 hours, so about a day from the time of intake, and it peaks about 6 to 8 hours. What we see is that mitophagy happens pretty rapidly. So in about a few days to a week, you start to see mitophagy happen. But then to really see the sort of biogenesis end of the spectrum where you start seeing newer healthy mitochondria come up takes about a month. And that's what our studies are showing. And then longer term, what we are seeing is about 2 to 4 months for the effects to happen.
Okay. And have you done a re-challenge? I'm curious.
Re-challenge as in have people wean off the product and then see it? No, we have not done that. We have not done longer also than 4 months. But we've started selling the product for 2 years, and a lot of people have been on and off, and they do. I mean, this is all anecdotal, but they tell us, of course, that they see big changes in once they stop the product and on fatigue and sort of mobility, sort of their, you know, a lot of people who are early adopters or fitness enthusiasts, so they really see how they recover from exercise and things like that.
Okay. So from the standpoint of the product model, is the intention for folks to start this and stay on this indefinitely?
I think the goal is, I guess, it's hitting the same biological pathways as exercise or caloric restriction would. So the answer I usually give in this case is, well, would you do only a few months of exercise and then stop and then forget the benefits you had? So I think it's kind of like your daily vitamin that you need to be taking to have optimal cellular health.
Okay, super. Phil, Dennis, I'm sure you've got some questions from a different vantage point.
I have one question for Anurag, which is just in terms of your route to markets now, Anurag. Now you are moving into building clinical evidence. That's great from a product validation perspective, but likewise, it throws up the potential of being a therapeutic in the future. And we've seen this with a number of different supplement manufacturers that their pathway could be to therapeutics. So just interested to know whether you have that in your sights at all.
Yeah. So we've started selling it for 2 years, and under the Timeline Nutrition brand, we also have a global partnership with Nestle Health Science, which has it under the Celtrian brand, and the Pure Encapsulation brand. There's another one called Renewal. Now, long term, you know, when you're working with natural molecules, in terms of intellectual property, you can't own matter of composition because it exists in nature. What you can own is the benefits, which we do have a whole wide range of IP around it. And as you think about the 10 years of research that we have done has led us to being very knowledgeable in the mitophagy space and in the sort of the gut metabolites and its structure. So the future is, and we do have a sister company out there now that is actively raising funding that is basically making new chemical entities built off our knowledge around urolithin A, and they will go target age-related disorders from a pharma perspective.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dennis?
Yeah, Anurag, that's really fascinating stuff. I come from a venture capital perspective, and talk about sister company. And I'm trying to figure out what the structure. What is the company who's funded it? What is a sister company? How does a venture capitalist make money, if you will, on this? And number one, and number two, the competition seems very, very difficult. But
yeah, so you know, we are privately held, and we have been lucky to have a lot of very patient VCs for 15 years to, you know, wait for the data and the science, and for 13 years, and then launch the products for the last 2 years, and the products are doing very well. So there is sort of the excitement around it. Look, in the dietary supplement space, the competition, as you said, is a lot. There's definitely that. From your question on a sister company and how you structure it, a lot of the same investors are sort of behind the sister company, and a lot of knowledge is shared. A lot of our scientists have moved on to the sister company. So it's kind of, again, I'm the medical guy in the company, so I can connect you to our CEO, and happy to, have that discussion. Our CEO can have that discussion with you. But the hope is that we use the knowledge and know-how around mitophagy to create new chemical entities that are perhaps, you can get matter of composition IP and go after pharma indications.
But is the new company going after NCEs, and you guys are on the nutrition?
Yeah, and we are working on the natural product. That's really the separation. Yeah.
Wonderful. Anurag, I have sort of a stewardships question, if you will.
Yeah.
When you think about the supplement space, which remains sort of the Wild West, especially in the United States, and you have a lot of very non-scientific based claims and pathways, how is what you're doing at Amazentis able to influence a higher standard for the industry writ large?
Believe it or not, that was the original goal, was to disrupt a lot of our founders, and a lot of people come from the pharma space. And the aspiration was, if it takes 15 years, it takes 15 years of research. And now when we start selling, you're right, that's the space. It's wild, wild west, and anybody can use anybody's data and start selling a product with similar sort of health benefit claims. I think you have to stand out. Consumers no longer not knowledgeable. Everybody, the amount of consumers I talk to, not a lot of pharma CMOs get to talk to end user. I get to talk to them, and people are very aware. These folks, they look up the science, they look up the quality of the papers, and they have an interaction. And I think that's really the route. And then the other route is really, how do you bring in the precision nutrition approach? How do you are not a nutrition company, but you're a tech company disrupting nutrition? I think that's where we are trying to bring this sort of take our test, see if it's, if you're already eating right, and if you're already working out right, then if you're already making the molecule enough. I mean, vitamin C, for example, is billion-dollar brands built out on vitamin C. Does anybody know how much you should be taking and how much you absorb? And nobody knows, but people know that vitamin C is good for your immune system. And so a lot of it is education and the science around it.
Sure. So what are the long-term plans?
Well, the long-term plans are to bring more partnerships with top professors and top universities, and really grow the science. Till like the first time I came on Metabesity was 2-3 years back. There was like 5 papers every year on the molecule. If you just go on PubMed and you type Urolithin A, this year there'll be 100. Right, and we are not the only one pushing them out. We're just publishing a few of those. It's just taking off. People are doing their own research and finding great benefits, and I know there are multiple top papers in the being planned. So yeah, I think we keep building the bar. As I mentioned, we are going into skincare, so the topical application is another interesting one for us. Yeah.
Okay. Super. Any final thoughts, Phil, Dennis?
No, I guess it's probably not your thing, Anurag, but the whole commercialization and selling of the product, that seems very difficult. I mean, do you guys have a plan, or how's that work?
Yeah, and it's really taken off today. We have thousands of customers. The plan is really to tap into sort of the influencers who are recognized as the Mark Hymans of the world, who are seen as sort of legitimate. Social media is one route. The second is education of a lot of practitioners who see older adults and have sort of more holistic practices. So that's another way to do it. And we're going after sports. So a lot of top teams, NBA teams, are taking the product. A lot of Tour de France cycling teams. So after a while, if people believe in the product, I'm not a marketeer, but I do believe if your product is good, you don't need to market it too much. People will believe in it. The word will spread. And I think that's what we are seeing right now.
Yeah.
Anurag, can you tease us with any sort of results you're seeing in skin or the immune system? Well, we saw the immune system data, but
so there will be a big publication coming out, actually not from us, but in collaboration at the end of the month on even an anti-tumor model, because immune metabolism is a very hot space, and certainly mitochondria have a role to play. And on the skin front, we are going after mitochondrial and skin aging and sort of the wrinkles, and does it have an impact on different sorts of photo aging and visual signs of aging such as wrinkles. But the data is just coming out, so happy to come back next year and share it.
Well, thank you so much for offering that. That is quite a tease. Final question I'm going to sort of amalgamate from the chat. Given the data you have, the general question is, what is the ideal diet to support the effectiveness of the product? If you were giving guidance to an end user.
Yeah,
we've got about a minute left.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you have to stick to your berries and nuts and have a diet rich in fiber and fruits. So that's the dietary. Of course, we do see people who are making it naturally. That's what they're doing right? They're eating berries, nuts, and then from a microbiome. To be honest, we thought we could go in and understand it better from a microbiome and find a probiotic that would do it as good as the direct supplementation route. The gut microbiome is a very complex ecosystem. So to take one probiotic and expect along with your juice or nuts, I think it's a very inefficient process that will not give you the therapeutic health benefits of this molecule.
Wonderful. Well, the last comment is the price point expected to go down as your market share goes up?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. We'll wish you the best of luck, and we'll look forward to seeing that paper at the end of the month.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Take care.